Is everybody settled in? Are we ready to start? Okay. With the quorum of the board present, I call the meeting to order. Roll call of members. Commissioner Lalonde.
Present.
Commissioner Aritz.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Evans.
Here.
And Commissioner Bakke is here also. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming. As you can see in the minutes there for the commissioners, we got a pretty busy schedule today. I think we have to approve a whole lot of stuff. So we'll get right on with the mission of the Great Falls Airport Authority is to optimize the transportation services and development in the region. Our vision is to maintain or maximize the airport's benefit to central Montana. Welcome, and please remember that the board appreciates participation from the public. If you have comments throughout the meeting, please stand, state your name and who you are, and your comments will be heard. So thank you for attendance. With that said, we'll start off with the consent agenda, which is made up of the routine day-to-day items that require board action but not appear to have significant public impact. These items may be pulled from the consent agenda if anyone so requests for separate discussion and vote by any board member. The consent agenda consists of A, approval of the board meeting minutes from May 2019, B, payroll checks totaling $120,023.96, maintenance and operation check number 24697 to 24736 totaling $94,860.32. D, approve the passenger facility charge totaling $70,000. And finally, E, financial reports for May of 2019. Do I have any discussion on the consent agenda?
Sir.
Excellent. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion.
All right, I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as stated. Can I have a second? And that is seconded. For a vote, all in favor of accepting the consent agenda as stated, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with nay? All right, the consent agenda passes. Okay, with that, onward and upward to the director's report.
Yes, we're at the last month of the year already. We are not likely to meet in August unless any pressing business pops up, but just a, sorry?
July.
Oh, I'm sorry, not likely to meet in July, I'm jumping ahead. Not meet again until August. But just want to make note on the financial report. We are going to be spending up some of those year-end dollars at the to get that operating budget closer to the budget projections. We've got a few projects that we will be doing here at the year-end, including that study to look at the terminal facade to see what else we could do with that going forward in that 2023 project, and a couple other projects at year-end. So I think we'll finish the year ahead on revenues and pretty close to the expense budget, which is great. Been a really strong year, and just wanted to let everybody know we've got a savings right now, just about 10% under budget, but we'll close that in over the last month or so to get a little closer to that budget with year-end money. The other thing I was going to note, if you drove in today and looked over in the cell phone lot, you'll see that the bench has been placed in honor of Homer Holman. The plaque's on the bench, and we've got a couple concrete pads there to get to the bench, and I think it looks great. The guys did a really nice job of getting that placed out there, really pretty view. If you're sitting out in the cell phone lot, it's a nice place to sit and reflect for a minute, and really excited with how that turned out. I think it's a great addition to the airport and an opportunity to honor someone that had so much to do with the early years of our commercial airport here and the GA side too. So really cool to see that. Take a minute on the way out to take a look at that. Also, we've got a fundraising campaign underway with the Chamber. Last month we were the quarterly lunch speaker for the Chamber, and we're currently working on developing a funding pool for new airline incentives. We've got some meetings, the first meeting's coming up here this week to meet with some of the local businesses to try and pull together a pool. We're hopeful that when we go down to the airline meetings in Big Sky in September, that we'll have a pretty complete incentive package to offer several of the airlines. We'll be looking for new California direct service down there. We also are working on a low-cost carrier that we'd like to get back in the market here in Great Falls. A couple of ideas to work with those incentives. And then come next spring, we'd be writing a SCASD grant. Ours is going to expire this year. You're only allowed to write one every 3 years. Can't have two outstanding at the same time. So we'll be eligible to write a new SCASD grant and compete for that program of funds in order to round out our incentive program. The Chamber right now is contacting all the past bidders to try and set up meetings so we can go back out, and donors, I should say, not bidders, and we can go back out and talk to the area businesses about developing that funding pool. The presentation we gave last month, I hadn't really studied the statistics that closely since we started that incentive program, but our airfares remain lower than they were 10 years ago when we had that, before we had that incentive program. And in that period, we saved local travelers about $32 million. If you look at the period prior to that compared to the period since incentives, it's quite a noticeable difference. And also in that period, we had between 7,000 up to 20,000 additional passengers every single year. I should say boardings, not even just passengers, but boardings in that period since we've had incentives. So that program really proved its worth, I think, in the last 7 years, and helped us get those Chicago flights, helped us get Frontier in our market, drive down those airline rates. During the majority of that period, we had the cheapest average fare in the state, which is a further indication of the value of that program. And so we're really excited to be bringing that program back online and trying to raise some additional funds and do another round of incentivized new routes. So you'll be seeing us do that. And along those lines, we're filming a commercial on Thursday here in the terminal building. We're actually splitting the commercial with Oakwells. So they'll be taking 1 minute, we'll be taking the other minute. And it's a full takeover on KRTV during their news, during the morning show. We'll play a couple times, and then we'll also have a big Facebook campaign. We'll be talking about the additional airline service that we have. We'll be talking about the new Alaska Super Saver fares that they have. Also, that we're raising money with the Chamber to try and put together another incentive pool. And then Oakwells will be talking about the new food in the building and the meeting rooms. And so it'll be kind of a takeover here at the airport. It's going to be filmed in various areas of the terminal building. Should be a really nice piece. So watch for that on KRTV. It'll be on the website too. So we'll be shooting that on Thursday. Let's see. Also at your desk here, you'll see a packet of information that looks like that. This is just the report the state puts out about every year. They put this out. It's their non-resident traveler expenditures and economic contribution in central Montana. And this is the 2018 version. On the second page, there wasn't a 17 report that we could find, but we did find 16. And we did some comparisons of the different categories of economic impact that comes from non-resident travel between the last 2 years. And I think what really stood out to me as I went through this is the outfitter line up 46% in 2 years. It's a massive increase. You can see if you go further down the vehicle rentals. Now I've lost vehicle. I should have highlighted that. There we go. Yeah, right below that, 35% increase in vehicle rentals. And that's really a reflection. We know the Canadian traffic is down, but we've been backfilling that with the increase in Chicago flying. And so every year, the last 2 years, there's been 7,000 additional seats pouring into our community in that Chicago flight to really take increase the traffic from the downturn caused by the Canadian travel as the Canadian dollar went down on Allegiant, and also the loss of Frontier a few years back. And so that really indicates how much growth there's been in that rental car line item. And I think fairly soon you'll be seeing us come back to the board with another expansion of the rental car lot. With explosive growth like that, as you can imagine, it's creating more and more demand for slots. And Laura's, even this week, had some additional requests for spaces. And so we want to accommodate that, want to have more rental car spaces, want to make it easy for customers to have rental cars here that are clean and ready to go. So we'll be working on that. But I think it's very telling, that some of these line items, I think the Genuine Montana strategy that we put in place a few years ago, advertising in these key markets like Chicago and Denver and Seattle, is really taking shape. And I think you see that in the outfitter and auto rental areas. Interestingly, when you look at the hotel side, the hotels really had the majority of their growth back in, as we had our explosive growth with Frontier. So if you look at where they were, about $34 million was the 2012 number. And they kind of popped all the way up to $50 million over 2 years. And they've kind of hung out in that range, that $50 million range. I think they got as high as $54 million a couple years ago. And so that's kind of the new level set by the additional tourism we've been bringing in. But as the Canadians have been declining, I think a lot of those Canadians, both not only for our service, when they come to fly Allegiant, oftentimes they'll stay the night after the flight comes in late, or if they have an earlier flight, they might stay the night before, and then they park at the hotel. The decline in our retail traffic is really the other reason I think those Canadians aren't coming as much and staying on their shopping trips. And when I looked back to 2012, the retail sales number, it's just shocking how much that has declined. That's the Amazon phenomenon and people going out of our market to shop in other communities. And so I think you see that in these numbers. I mean, another further 24% decline last year in retail sales. Of course, Sears has gone offline, Kmart's gone offline over the last couple of years, Shopko most recently. So we are seeing a decline in inventory of shopping, and so I really think as I kind of work through the trends on and seeing the divergence of our traffic climbing back up from where the hotels are, my explanation for that would be as we've been building traffic back in the summer months, it hasn't been enough to compensate for the decline in the Allegiant traffic. They're down about 18% over the last 8 years as the Canadian dollar has declined, and so I think a lot of those Canadians, both on the retail side and on the airline flying side, are really why we're seeing that kind of sticky wicket on the hotel side of not being able to grow the overall hotel revenue. But I think when you look at our numbers, we're really seeing strength in those categories that you would expect when we're growing a new tourism market. The rental car, the outfitter, even the Made in Montana. Those are the categories you would expect to see growth in as we grow a tourism market here in the community. And so just a brief overview of these numbers. We had talked about these a little bit a few months ago, that the contributions made by travel in our community. And I think this does a great job of really kind of delving into that in a little greater detail. The total number is down significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, mainly because of gasoline sales. Gasoline sales were up to 150 million a few years back when the prices were higher. Yeah. And so that's the largest delta that you see over the last few years. But interesting data and something I thought I'd bring to your attention, and further illustration of how much growth we're having in that rental car market, which is great. And then the other thing I was going to mention is we have a tremendous amount of construction going on in every single corner of the airport right now. And maybe, Rod, if you wouldn't mind updating us real quick on some of those projects.
Got quite a bit going on, like John said. So localizer down on the north end of the runway. The FAA hasn't been able to fly that yet, but it's scheduled tomorrow. Again, their aircraft was broke down, so the FAA flight check will be here tomorrow. SRE building's going along really well. They're getting it almost all closed in now. Sheeting on the inside, doing electrical, installing the overhead doors. So that's moving along. They got quite a few people working out there, so seeing a lot of progress every day there. They'll be doing the parking lot around the building, probably starting in the next week or so. So that'll help dust and mud control down there. Couple projects in the terminal. We're starting a carpet replacement in the first vestibule down here, and we're grinding into the terrazzo to try to make a smooth transition to the carpet and the terrazzo without having the metal strip in there. So you'll see that's kind of tore up right now, but it's going pretty well. Hopefully carpet will start on Thursday there. Kind of started down there to test our plan and see how it's working, and then we'll move up probably to the main entrance by the escalators, since that's the main entrance and exit there. So that's going pretty good. Down on the south end again, the large hangar, it's moving along really well. Got power and gas to it in the last week. Scheduled to pour the concrete floor on the first. Gonna work all night on that. Got our sewer is just about complete. MRT made the connection into the manhole the last couple days, so getting there. And then it's got to be connected to the large hangar too, but the rest of it throughout the private hangars, that's all completed.
You mentioned disaster area.
Yeah, I got that. Also for the terminal area, a couple other things. It's the water damage that was down here under the East Concourse. They've started on that. They're actually putting that back together right now. And lighting inside the terminal, we've been working on a project to change over to LEDs, and we've got that probably pretty close to done. We just finished up with a little piece in the restaurant there, and then our offices. So it's really made some big improvements there. So that's getting close to being wrapped up. I met with their National Guard last week. We talked about the last barrier curb out on the runway that was left after they disassembled the aircraft arrestor barrier system. So there's one curb out there, a concrete curb. So it looks like the Guard's ready to bid that project. So hopefully that'll work with our runway project, which is the resealing or bog sealing and crack sealing on the runway, which we don't have an official start date, but hopefully towards the end of April or July and August we'll be working on that. It'll be just closed down at night, midnight to 5 a.m. So hopefully won't disrupt any flights there.
We haven't heard anything on grant timing yet, Chris, I don't think.
We have not,
So the FAA, well, for about 15 years now, the grants have been much slower than they used to be, and so we're awaiting a grant so we can start that project, get it awarded, and get the clock started on it. And we expect probably around end of July for that grant.
Probably noticed the water tank's gone, so
Dang.
that went
It's so pretty.
well, and actually went pretty quick, so that's down in history now. The other thing, if you're out on the airfield, you'll see some temporary aircraft arrestor barriers going in. That's for the mounts from open house, July 13th and 14th, I believe. So been working at nights installing the temporary barriers for the F-22 flight demonstration.
Yeah, they don't have an active airfield, so none of those acts can land at Malmstrom. Obviously, the Helos can, but so we're the airfield for the air show. Obviously, the Lake Washington Air Show is one that way. They can't land in the lake, so it's not uncommon to have the arrestor barrier remote. We'll just get we're not going to have to string the cable except for when that F-22 is going up, and then we can take that down after. I think it's the only act that requires it. That'll be a really great demonstration. Exciting to see that plane come into air shows. So looking forward to that.
And I believe the week before you're hosting a pretty big event.
Yeah. 5 World War II airplanes.
So it'll be a fun couple weeks here at the airport for that kind of stuff.
Man, if you've never watched an F-22 Raptor air show demo, it's very impressive. Even for me, having flown them. It's amazing.
So that's about wraps up the construction, I think.
Yeah, and that's all we have this month on the director's report. You know, like you said, a tremendous amount going on. About every corner of the airport torn up right now, but exciting stuff. And here in the next month, hopefully we'll be wrapping up last year's projects and starting this year's projects. But exciting stuff. And SRE building, Chris, when's the delivery date?
July 14th is scheduled right now.
So coming up pretty quick.
Is the barrier berm, is that the southwest corner, or is that the approach in on the northeast?
The
It still
temporary?
has a berm that needs to go in.
The pappy that's got to come down is on the south.
Oh, that's on the south.
Yep.
Okay.
southwest side of the runway.
So is there gonna be any change to the PAPI on the northeast corner?
No.
2-1.
No, this PAPI's got to come down, it's got to be regraded through there and then put back up.
They'll be relocated in the same spot. Just that foundations will be sticking out of the ground if they regraded that area. So they'll pull those foundations, make new foundations, reset the PAPIs in the same location.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it.
Quick disclaimer before we start with the official projects. If there are any agenda items that present a conflict of interest and subsequently require a member to abstain from discussion and vote for our commissioners, please so state. Everybody have? Excellent. With that, project number 1, capital project runway 321, improvements and maintenance.
Yes, as we mentioned last month, we awarded bids on this project, or we received bids on this project back in late April, and the total project program costs are a little higher than we expected. As we mentioned last month, about 4 or 5 years ago, we implemented a new way of dealing with our projects. Rather than doing 4 separate board actions for the project, which include design, then construction estimates, and then bid, acceptance and budget setting. What we moved to was a programmatic approval at the beginning of the project so that we can start design. That allows us to get the design started in the fall or winter. So we've been bringing projects and total costs with engineers' estimates to the board early in the program cycle in January, sometimes December, even November, and getting that approval and then adjusting the budget once we have bids in hand if the budget needs adjusted. This project in particular, we don't have really any control over what the FAA's cost to move the PAPI would be. So our engineers kind of put a number out there and the FAA determined what the cost was. They're doing the work. That project would be funded with savings from the old taxiway C runway 17 project a few years back. And the project costs were a little higher than we expected, so we adjusted the budget last month to increase the total project cost from $1.2 million to $1.525 million. As you can see, that increased the amount of entitlements that we'll be using on the project and our local share. And so we'd like to get the board's approval to amend that budget from $1.2 million to a total of $1.525 million to complete this year's program. This includes the fog sealing, the PAPI relocation, and the weather sensors that we'll be adding to runway 17. So we can monitor the current pavement conditions remotely.
Is there any one area that went up significantly, or that's a significant portion of that increase? Or is it just
I think it's the total program cost. The weather sensor, we didn't have a real good number for that because it's not something you can put a quantity on. You have to kind of figure out where the utilities are and how long it'll take to get them there. So we had some early planning cost estimates, and as we got into design, I think pretty much every element of it was a little higher than what we thought. The fog seal, we want to do that with a minimum impact to operations, so we're requiring night work so it doesn't impact our airline flights. We don't always have the airline schedule until 60 days prior to summer, and so we had to restrict those work hours a little more, which cost us some in the bid. Really across the board, as we looked through the program costs, I think the costs were just a little higher than our early planning numbers indicated.
And is there a specific source of our authority funds for the extra 32.5 that?
That'll come out of our local dollars, and then the airlines will reimburse us for that. So every year, the local match we charge to the airlines. This happens to be an airfield project, so it'll go on the landing fee. So this will be the landing fee component of our program.
And we'll get that back next year, basically. It goes into the...
Yes, it'll go in the rates that we start charging here next month. We bill the airlines for the cost.
A couple of these projects, we've come in low on the original estimates and have adjusted. If we ever consider like adding an automatic 10% buffer to the cost, because it seems to be a pattern where we're consistently underestimating the costs and then coming in and raising approval?
Some are under, some are over. I mean, what we're doing is basically when we do the capital plan, we have a notional idea what the projects are. And we're taking these directly from the capital plan and bringing them to the board so we can start the design work. What we were finding is we were constantly adjusting everything. If we did separate design, budgeting up front, and then did the bidding later. Plus, what we had a lot of times too is we weren't approving the project until this time of year, and we had to, 2 years ago, we had to do a special board meeting because we didn't have bids in hand, and everything pulled together until July. And so what we decided to do to have a little less chaos is have the program approval way up front when we know the fiscal year is coming up for the project, and then adjust to the project. And so some are over, some are under. I mean, the vestibules, which is on today's agenda, is a fraction of what we thought it was going to be. I think we had that one at 196,000 or something. It was way more than what we're bringing to the board. So some are way under, some are way over. You only hear about it when it's way over because we have to come back for additional authorization.
Just asking if that was.
They need to start patting themselves on the back when it goes under.
I just know when I've done some budgeting in the past, when we do initial estimates, the costs always are gonna go up. So
I
we
know.
put in a 10% buffer so that you don't have to come back.
Yeah.
And then if there's savings, then great.
Yeah.
I mean, you can use it other places, but,
Yeah, and a lot of times it's, we don't have a good idea of the scope of the project at the time. We know generally what we're trying to accomplish, but, we don't have good engineering takeoffs on how much pavement's out there. So it does vary quite a bit. But it's one of the unfortunate things about having, bringing the program costs as opposed to, doing the design and then bringing a construction cost to the board once we have an engineered design. The engineer's estimates are actually, usually pretty close. We've only had the steel building last year. I mean, everyone, steel costs just went nuts, and that couldn't have been avoided. We never would have gotten that one right because the engineer's estimate was way off. But on this one, this is a good example. We're well below engineer's estimate once we got through design, but we're above the programmatic costs that we were carrying in the capital program. When we put the capital program up.
just wondering.
Yeah.
Good question. All right, now I have a motion to accept the capital project runway 321 improvements and maintenance as updated for an increased updated budget of $1,525,000.
I'll make that motion. I won't restate it because
I
you
know.
said it perfectly.
That's why I said it, so you didn't have to figure it out.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Outstanding. With no further discussion, can I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, and we'll vote. All in favor of accepting the capital project runway 321 improvements and maintenance updated budget of $1,525,000, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved.
All right.
All right, number 2, the fueling station development agreement.
Yes, this project pertains to the fueling station that we've been working on for the last couple of years. We executed a lease earlier this year for the property out at the airport entrance, commercial lot 1 as we refer to it. And the developer has been working on permitting. As part of that project, they're going to acquire some land from the Swanson family that's adjacent, actually kind of between our parcel and the interstate, to allow that parcel to be a little deeper. That property is in the county. So they've got to do a development agreement to get the city to annex it into the city because the development will straddle both properties. And so as part of that purchase and annexation, there'll be construction on our property, city utilities built on our property, and other things. The city, as a normal function, likes to have a development agreement when new property is annexed in. And so since that's happening on property that's being combined with development that we, on our property, they want us to be a party to the development agreement. So it's kind of a complex three-way agreement. But our attorney's been working on it, and we've developed an agreement that both he and I believe is going to work fine. And we'd like the board's approval to execute a development agreement in the form that you see here. This document that our attorney has approved, and I've read through it also. adjusted some of the things that didn't apply to us. Obviously, some of the terms apply directly to the developer because they're doing things that we aren't doing. But there are some things that we need to acknowledge are happening on our property. And so I think we finally struck that balance of an agreement that ties everyone up appropriately. And we'd like permission to go ahead and execute that so we can move forward with the permitting process for that fueling station.
Okay, specifically the discussion of us being responsible for city payments for additional stuff is out of that agreement?
Yeah, so because there's a portion of it that is county property that will be owned by, that will become city property that is owned by Love's, a portion of the property is subject to street assessments and other assessments that we are subject to. And so we adjusted that clause to make it fit in line with the opinion we received from the FAA, so that the portion of it that still belongs in the city, portion that belongs to Love's will be subject to that, the portion that belongs to us won't, according to this development agreement. So we worked through all that. It was, like I said, kind of a complex duck because there's three parties in there and some of the stuff applies to each of the parties. And so I think we finally have gotten through it all and have an agreement here that everybody thinks will work. So.
And then the only other substantial that applies to us specifically is the emergency communications, the 911 center, and the road that will go in front of that. Are we part of the building prop that, as it says in the airport, agrees per the exhibit to construct and maintain 2 earthen berms at its cost on the east side of the newly constructed roadway with berm construction stuff and a possible fence on top of it. I assume that we're not actually building those berms, but how's that going to work?
Yeah, Love's is going to build those. Those are the earthen berm is to keep someone from ramming the fence, and that's the current design. Current idea would be to berm it. We also talked about maybe a guardrail would be more effective. So I'm sure as we get into design, there'll be more ideas on how to, how to best do that. The city, as part of the agreement when we did the 911 center, there's 2 things in this agreement that were acknowledged. They, in exchange for having that property tied up for 40 years, they're paying $100,000 and $104,000, I think, towards the development of the airport road, the road into this development. And so that's acknowledged in there too. And they're going to pay that to us, and then we in turn pay that to Love's, because Love's is building the road. That's the contribution from the city to the road, which Love's will be building that road. We're not building it. And then the berm and the other stuff will be built by Love's also. So there's a couple of pieces in there, like I said, that pertain to each party. The city and us agreed to the berm in the agreement where they agreed to the $104,000. So the city wants us to be responsible for that and us to get the $104,000. But both of those things will in fact be related to Love's, because we're going to give them the $104,000 for construction of the road, and then they're going to build that, and they're going to build the earthen berm.
So with the berm along the road that's exposed to the truck stop, what's their new entry plan going to be into their facility?
Well, that was, I did talk to the city manager about that, and my recommendation was that we move the entrance. There's the old remnant of the, let's see here. So what you're saying is essentially today the entrance to the parking lot will be out here off of this new road, will be constructed here, and they're going to enter it there. Obviously, this is all going to be a big paved area, and there's nothing to prevent someone from getting a full head of steam and ram the gate. We wouldn't even really need it because it's the gate and not the poles aren't fixed in the ground. You really don't need that much energy to do that. My recommendation was to move the entryway over to here where the FAA used to have an informal gate. This used to have security around it. They used to have a gate back here, and that would require 2 90-degree turns in order to get to their gate. One 90-degree turn here, and then another one right at the entry point, which would keep you from having much energy when you plow the gate. But and then we had offered to the city to take this parcel as part of this road construction, we were going to give them the entire easement, which goes along here, and give them that property if they would take over maintenance of this road. We plan to construct back here. And that'll allow us to close Airport Avenue B. This is part of the Airport Avenue B discussion, which has long been the plan. We've been talking to the city about that for many years. But they opted not to take this, because they didn't want the maintenance responsibility, and they're going to leave the entry over there. So, I mean, there is the potential security hazard of someone, bailing through that fence from the
So the
development.
berm will actually be the full length, but it
Except
will
the
stop prior to the gate.
Yeah, except the gate. And so, they had mentioned they wanted more parking. We really thought this could offer them quite a bit more parking, but, I'm not sure they want the expense of it. There is a solution there, and it's not to say that couldn't happen later. They could certainly move the gate if they're concerned about it in the future to that other side.
And I didn't see any closure in the agreement about closing of Airport Avenue B. That's not.
Really more of a separate subject. I mean, we're still waiting to see if we can work terms out with the Swanson family to acquire that property. We've made a couple of offers, and we were really close to getting it. In their mind, they would like to keep Airport Avenue B open as an option, which eliminates our desire to even own that property. So, we've kind of told them if Airport Avenue B remains open, we have no interest in buying that right away, because the whole point of closing Airport Avenue B is so we can clean up that Mang intersection and make the Mang intersection eligible, because at that point, all the airport uses would start. It would only be airport uses, I should say, after this point. So we take this entire stick of road, including the Mang intersection and our new terminal exit that comes out here, and we make that section eligible. As it sits today, and what we've expressed to the city, we want to close Airport Avenue B because today the Swanson family and this little business that's built over here and the Skyline Bar, which are all separate owners, they access those developments here. If there's anything other than airport access, the FAA won't allow that to be eligible. And so basically today, this entire stretch of road is ineligible. We've had some preliminary discussions with the FAA to limit that because those are multi-lane roads, and they've agreed that, okay, only the right lane is ineligible because they can't really use the left lane to turn in on the inbound, and on the outbound, only the left lane is ineligible because the right lane really picks up the terminal and the other traffic. So the FAA is working with us to limit the cost that we'll inherit, because without our federal dollars, we can't use PFCs either. That comes out of our local funds. And so we want to minimize the amount of the roadway that is ineligible as we develop in the future. Moving it up to here and getting it out of that intersection, there might have to eventually be a light here or a roundabout or something that's going to be potentially a multi-million-dollar improvement to that intersection someday. We want that to push as far to the interstate as we can, so we don't have that significant costs on our docket if we don't have to.
And the current plan to exit Love's will be on that new road that's built right in front of the 911 building.
Their primary truck exit will be there.
So it'll
They'll
be a
have
left.
other exits. I think there's 2 other exits in there, Rod, isn't
I
there?
think so.
Yeah, and so their primary exit will be there.
So it'll be a left turn onto the main road. Is there a light plan for that?
There's not.
Okay, so it'll be,
It'll function a lot like the interstate does today, with no signal.
So John, in addition to the berms and the gates, the next section, number 13, talks about the shared use path. I'm not recollecting what the shared use path is. What is that?
Isn't that the roadway, the shared use path?
Well, it's 13, deferral agreement for shared use path. A 10-foot wide shared use path in the right-of-way of Airport Drive.
10 feet's not big enough for the road.
Oh, that must be utility right-of-ways.
I'm not familiar with what that means or what that's referring to.
I bet that's an easement for utilities.
That was,
Yeah, is that gonna be near the berm, I assume?
well, that's what, so this follows right on the discussion of the ECC and the berms and gates and things.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the sidewalk is what that is. The city agreed to defer the sidewalk because all new requirements and all new development in the city requires a, I guess they're calling it shared use path, but it's probably sidewalk plus bike lane. And I talked to Andrew Finch a few months ago, after one of the meetings, and he said that he would defer sidewalks and bike paths up at the airport for the time being because there's no way to, it's an island, there's no way to get here, even though it's city.
Right.
There's no way to get them safely here until something happens, a trail network or something up the hill, which there is discussion about that. So that's what that is it's the sidewalk and bike lane deferral.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions? You're looking pretty hard today.
Yep.
He's thinking.
You're asking all the good questions, that's why.
All right, so with that, can I have a motion to accept the fueling station development agreement as shown in annexation and development agreement on the next attachment?
Well, we aren't exactly accepting it as it
Oh,
is.
no,
We
you're-
are
Good point.
authorizing
authorization to
negotiation. Yeah.
Why don't you state it?
All right. I would be happy to make the motion as presented to allow the airport director authorization to negotiate a development agreement with the city for the fueling station, substantially in the form list reviewed.
Perfect. I'll second that. So, any further discussion on that? Okay, with that, let's vote on accepting what she just said, so I don't have to try to say it again. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? There are no nays. You are approved at developing that agreement. Thank you. Okay, number 3, lower shop lease.
Yes, in a couple of weeks, we'll have our shop complete, and we'll be moving a lot of our equipment out of the lower shop into the expanded SRE building. With that, we were almost immediately contacted by AdMax, and they're interested in having a parts warehouse here in Great Falls where they would ship components for the plane lines they support out of Great Falls. Initially they had wanted to talk about the kind of defunct hangar next to the paint hangar with 3 sides there, and renovating that. We kind of talked about that building, in order to get to any kind of code occupiable building needs a tremendous amount of work. There's really nothing there but a shell sitting on a foundation. And so we settled on the potential for leasing them half of our lower shop once we get out of there, and then maybe eventually over time as we develop other buildings down at our shop area, they might have that entire building. That was always kind of in the plan as we started moving our functions down to that end of the field. Is we assumed that Holman Aviation and AvMax and the other tenants down at that end, as they expand in the future, are going to need the facilities down in that area and the land, if nothing else. And so it's better for us to build on a spot that's a little more out of the way, less out of the way than it used to be, but still at a grade that's not easy to reach with airplanes up there on the hill. So Laura even today is having some showings over there with the AvMax folks, trying to get them into that building so they can kind of see what we have there. But ideally, if everything works out, we'd like to lease them half that building for a rent, an annual rent of about $20,000. It works out to about $5 a square foot, which is similar to what the board approved on the upper shop a few years ago. Unfortunately, we had offered the upper shop to AvMax, and at the time they weren't interested, and so it's been since leased, and Fleet Maintenance is leasing that building, plans to stay in there for a longer period than what AvMax can wait for. So we'd like to lease them half that building for about $20,000 per year. We think that lease would start over the summer, and they would be in there potentially by the time we meet next. So we'd ask for the board's approval to lease in that building.
Is the building considered fully up to code and immediate lease? Do we have any additional costs stay unexpected to?
No, there's a demising wall down the middle of it already, so it's convenient for us to just lock that and not have access between the two sides. So we can kind of double lock that with blind locks so that they can, neither one of us can unlock it. And so then they can have half that building, and it's just basically a single loaded warehouse storage type building. So it's set up pretty well for the use that they want to use it for, which is parts storage. We store quite a few parts in there for all of our equipment, or have historically. So they'll be doing much the same, just airplane components instead of snow vehicle components.
Will they be responsible for maintenance and upkeep?
Of their half, and then how are we going to do utilities? We're just going to split them? Is that what we thought, or?
Either that, or we will put an amount into the monthly, but I'm waiting to hear back from them. What we would do, we would just look at the history and divide it.
Divide it based on square footage between us and them. And we don't have any immediate plans to vacate the other half. It would take another building. We had thought we would leave our summer stuff down there kind of permanently, our mowers and stuff that we don't get out in the winter that really don't need to be proximate to the terminal or anything. If they really need this and it's an employment opportunity, an economic development opportunity, or an opportunity to make them more planted here at the airport, then we'll probably look to build some type of stick-built building down at the other end for our smaller equipment. The tracker and stuff don't need the ceiling height that we have in the SRE building, so adding bays for those seems kind of extravagant. We probably build something a lot cheaper and smaller to accommodate most of that summer equipment. So we may eventually in the next few years start putting something in the capital plan to vacate that other half if they need it. We certainly want to make it easy for them to be here and give them the space that they need. But currently it sounds like all that they really need is about half that building, which we should be able to give them.
Other questions? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve that the administration lease the lower shop to Avmax for an initial annual rent of $20,000 plus half utilities.
Any other questions, discussion? A second? All right. That being stated, we will vote on the staff recommendation for leasing 4,000 square feet of the lower shop to Avnex for initial amount of 20,000 plus half utilities. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
And the broker agreement for land lease.
Yes, a few years back, we had the 150 acres that sits out along the interstate represented by a broker from Kidder Matthews. That agreement expired, and for the last probably about 2-3 years, we haven't had the property on the MLSs. So it's out on LoopNet, but not everyone has access. Well, everyone has access to LoopNet, but not everybody checks LoopNet, I should say. So we want to get it back out and listed on the on some more of the retail sites. And so we'd like to put together a 1-year agreement with Dahlquist to get that property listed again. There's some ongoing discussions about development out there, but we don't think those are quite ripe yet. Probably a year from now, we'll revisit that as we see some of the developments that are happening in the city, how they move forward. But for the next year, we'd like to have it out there just so it's out in the market and everyone has a chance to see it and express interest in it. And so we'd like to recommend that we put together a broker agreement for 1 year with Dahlquist. We would basically provide them 1 year of rent off the property if it develops, or whatever portion of the property that they would get out there. And we are going to exempt out known developers that we have right now. So that if those developers come in with their plan and want to take the property, there would be a commission paid for that. But basically, it's just a straightforward broker agreement for 1 year in exchange for a year of rent if they're able to get the property leased up.
Is that the last real parcel available of the airport property that we're looking to lease out?
No, there's quite a bit of property available. The parcels we're talking about are what we call the retail land out here. We have, the FAA has approved leasing that land for other than airport uses because the frontage road bisects it. So that's really the property we think is most prime for development along the interstate there. A few years back, we had a number of retailers express some interest in that. We had a developer that was interested in building a shopping center up there, a lifestyle center. We've had a number of close calls with that property, but we haven't been able to get it fully leased out. We have quite a bit of other land. There's some land in here that can be leased. We have all this sort of like aviation industrial land over in this area that now that we have taxiway C, we have this nice kind of airport industrial park area where we could have aviation-related uses with immediate access to taxiway C develop over in that area. We have quite a bit of acreage down in this area that we could develop in the future. There's quite a bit of land still yet to develop, but this interstate property and these types of properties, it doesn't really do you much good to list those with a broker because there's such unique uses, like a Titan Manufacturing or somebody that takes aircraft and turns them into different types of aircraft would want that property, and they're going to be looking at airports specifically, not necessarily working through a broker. And you know, in Colorado Springs, we had Titan come in. We had a guy that renovated Warbirds that came in. Those deals all came to us directly from people looking at airports and saying, I'd like to use this land here. This land down here is more general use. A Costco could go there, you know, a Chick-fil-A, I mean, whoever's looking at our market as and wants interstate accessible, quick food, quick retail, that type of thing. You know, they're going to be looking around the community going, oh, wait a minute, that's an interstate parcel. They don't necessarily care whether it's at the airport. In fact, they might prefer it's not at the airport. But they're looking for something that's close to an interstate with good access. You know, it may not necessarily be retail. It could be somebody like I-State Trucking. And I forget, how did we get I-State Trucking? Was that from LoopNet?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. They may have seen our listing on LoopNet. But yeah, those guys are looking for property near an interstate, and that's who's most likely to lease that property. Really doesn't have much to do with the airport.
So John, was it Bozeman that just announced the development, the commercial retail development? Was it Bozeman out there? Just in the last week?
Oh, really? I'm not aware of that one.
Oh, I was gonna ask if we knew how they, you know, what their approach was to that. I was traveling and I thought I saw.
Could be. I haven't seen that yet. I'm trying to think who already has. Missoula has an industrial park out in front of their airport that they have been marketing for a long time, and it's not full, but they have quite a few uses in it. They actually got a hotel there. You know, that was, you may remember a few years ago we did that hotel study,
Yep.
and I remember you know, we had some good discussion about whether or not that was practical. Well outside of town, Missoula has a hotel right at the airport. You know, the Four Corners area really is airport related in Bozeman. You know, there's quite a bit of, I doubt it's Bozeman that has retail because they're really land poor. They're having a heck of a time, you know, finding land. They're building the rental car parking garage. I mean, they're every nook and cranny of that airport right now. They're trying to get something built on.
I have to look for, I should have saved it, but I was traveling.
Helena has the Costco. That's on airport
Yeah, it's
land.
on Helena.
And the hotel, I think the Staybridge is on their land, is it not?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So one of the hotels is on their land too.
Actually, I'm thinking I may have read it in, Jen, what's the publication you roll into?
Montana Today.
Montana Today, that's where I think I might have seen it.
Oh,
Might have to go back.
Check.
Well, yeah, we've got the premier source right here.
We got everybody to know that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be totally different than what we're trying to do here, but I just thought it was interesting, and I wondered how they pursued that and how long it took and all that.
yeah, I know in the case of the Costco was looking at the community and couldn't find an area they liked, and so the airport approached Costco and they worked it out. Ron Mercer back then worked it out with Costco. We've talked to Costco, and they actually told us they really like our parcel. The biggest hesitation for them is we have a Sam's, and there's a lot of communities our size that don't have either one.
Right.
You know, so they're kind of, they said, I think they had like, what was it, 50 or 38 or something communities that they said were our size that didn't have either one of them. And so they were kind of working down that list before they kind of circled back and went head to head with Sam's. They said not just hurts their margins on some items.
Well, and they
Sam's
said
and
we have the
two Super Bowls.
stats and we know that you guys are already
They're already
driving
driving
down
down
there,
the
so.
Helena. Yeah, I think
Why build one
800
for you?
members, I think, from Great Falls down there. Quite a few.
If you build it, they will come, right?
Well, there's a Winco sign clear down the interstate here, so that somebody thinks so.
Is the agreement going to allow them to, the 150-acre parcel, subdivide it into
Yeah,
lots, or at least approach us to subdivide it into lots appropriate for whatever use may be
yeah.
required?
And of course, we can't do any leases without, board approval, so I mean, whatever they would bring in, we would have to work through you guys.
And with the large hangar addition, how much of the utilities go close enough that, or would it require significant utility upgrades?
The utilities were, we brought the utilities down there with the first phase of the SRE building. They went all the way down to the corner, and then from the SRE building to get to the large hangar, we had to cut them down into the airfield. So most of the utilities were constructed with the SRE building. That's, I don't think maybe none of you were on the board back then, but I used to refer to it as spending the same dollar 3 times. We got the utilities to the 20-acre GA parcel, which is now under development with the big hangar. We got the utilities to our SRE building, which we needed to relocate. And then we enabled the retail development with those same utilities on that project. So part of the reason the SRE building ended up way down there was so we could get utilities down to that retail pad and to the 20 acres of GA development that was down there. So we have enough water capacity in that vicinity. We have plenty of sewer capacity down there with that gravity line. We'll have to cross the road with some of these again, but the electric's already there. We've got, if you go out there today, I think there's a fire hydrant and electric on that side, aren't there, Chris?
There is.
Yeah, we cut the road and put those utilities
We
across.
put water and sewer across the
Also,
road.
too, I remember that. So really, everything's already across from the SRE building. So it doesn't, it doesn't go the full length of it. So the SRE building sits, I'm upside down here. Yeah, the SRE building sits here, and the 150 acres is this, and then we've got 300 acres. So all the utilities are crossed right there. So you'll still have to drag them laterally back and forth, but at least we've got the stub outs into the heart of that big parcel there. That was part of that program when we did the first phase of the SRE.
Any reason in particular for going with Dahlquist?
What's that?
Any reason in particular for going with Dahlquist?
They have a commercial department. So just talking with them, and I guess it's harder to find the commercial properties and someone that's being aggressive with them. The other commercial, what's Masick? Mark. Yeah, I mean, he's actually the other one that's.
Well, then there's
looking.
Scott.
Oh, and Scott. Scott was the one that's looking at.
Yeah,
it.
Scott's actually, we're working with him directly on
Yeah.
some stuff, and so we can't really put him in that role. Now, he may come in and say, hey, I want to option this property, and then he would have the ability to take it all and do whatever he wants with it. But he's already exempted out because we've been working with him on some other plans. I think those are the 3 commercial realtors in Great Falls.
There you go. Excellent. All right, any other questions? Do I have a motion? I'll start with the motion to accept the staff recommendation to bring on board Dahlquist Realtors to broker an agreement or look for an agreement to broker for a 1-year term to lease the 150-acre parcel south of the detention center and to be renewable by mutual agreement for additional years.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? No other discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor of a brokerage agreement for the land lease to Dahlquist Realtors, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Continue.
Great, thank you.
Approved. All right, number 5, capital project terminal refresh for the doors.
Yes, you may recall back at it was a February meeting, we brought to the board a program for the what we're referring to as a terminal refresh program. This will help us to upgrade some of the areas of the terminal, basic renewal, replacement, and refresh of the bathrooms, that type of thing. There's about 15 projects or so. A couple of the early projects that we wanted to get underway was a carpet replacement in the vestibules and then replacement of the mechanical doors in the vestibules. So earlier this year, you approved the carpet refresh, and now we have a bid in place for the vestibules. Rod's still working on another bid or two, but we would like to go ahead and replace those vestibule doors. One of the ones down near Delta right now doesn't work. We've had a heck of a time trying to figure out what's wrong with it. They've become really a daily maintenance item where one of them's off track about every morning or needs reset. And so I think all of us on staff know how to fix the doors, even Chris, as he walks in and out of the building, and how to reset the doors because they're getting that frequently off kilter. And so we'd like to go out and replace those. We think we can get it done for about $80,000. We told the board several months ago that we plan to spend about $20,000 or about $100,000 this year on the terminal refresh program. We'll probably spend another $100,000 next year and continue to kind of bite at it that way a little bit until we do some of the bigger programmatic projects in the next few years, and then probably a debt issuance in 2023 to tackle the major element, which is the common use baggage equipment system. That would cause us to blow back the ticket counters about 20 feet, tear down the walls in between those baggage bays, and basically enclose the portion of the building that we built during the remodel a few years ago. So if you look at the back of the building today, you see through it. Up to the old exterior wall, we'll enclose that, and all the baggage system will reside in that new area. It's one of the elements we kind of planned into the project a few years ago. And so that big element will probably be itself about $5 million of the program, and so we'll need to do some debt issuance then. But up until then, we're going to kind of chip away at this program piece by piece. We've got some other smaller elements that we'll be doing in the next couple of years, signage. We want to start replacing some of the lobby furniture. We've completed all of the airside furniture has been replaced, but now we want to come back and get some of this lobby furniture out here. It's getting kind of dated, that type of thing. And so we'd like the board's approval to spend about $80,000 to replace all of the vestibule doors. One note in here, it does not impact the doors at the end of the building in the rental car lot. We need to make some vestibule changes over there. That one's a different configuration. The doors are actually, instead of being nested this way, they're actually opposing each other. And we get some real wind on one set of doors, so we have to turn it off in high winds. We want to do something different with that entire vestibule. We may even have to go a revolving door over there or something because it gets the wind load on that side pretty heavy. But that'll be in a later element when we're going to do structural changes to other areas of the building. This is just a simple swap out of doors. So again, we'd like approval to get those doors in for about $80,000.
Do we think that's the best option? I know Billings has the large revolving doors, so every time it turns, you don't have to worry about the wind issue as it goes through that. And then right now, a lot of times you end up opening the outside door, by the time you're halfway through, the inside door is open. So now you got both doors open, and you know the Venturi effect going through the middle.
I think the doors we have now are much slower than what we'll probably end up with, so you won't get as much of that. I mean, Missoula has the revolving doors now, and we can't wait to get rid of them. You get a lot of injuries in the revolving doors. You've got your choice between the ones that are pushed by the folks or the ones that are automatic. The automatic ones, people come in and immediately push them and it stops. The ones that are not automatic, somebody pushes harder than the guy behind him and they get hit in the head. And so for years, every revolving, Chris, you've probably seen in other buildings too, all those revolving doors, you end up with a lot of injuries. And people get their bag behind it, it hits the bag and stops it. I mean, they're not the best answer. Like I said, Missoula can't wait to get rid of theirs. They have some over there now. I haven't really talked to buildings about theirs, but Missoula's, I think, were planned since I've been here, and they're already trying to get rid of them. So kind of gives you an indication. I've never been a big fan of those. I wish they would work better, but in a building where you've got people dragging bags and you're 6 feet long and strollers and all those things, or a kid behind you that you're trying to hold their hand, the kid gets their hand in there, and I mean, they end up with a ton of injuries.
And I assume it's the inner and outer doors you're going to replace.
Yes, this will be, each door set has 2 doors, and so we'll be doing all 8 of those doors along the front of the building.
They're gonna have more light. It gets pretty dark in there at night, because there's no lights in that section
Vestibule.
in the vestibule. I know
maybe we could look at that with the rest of our lighting.
Yeah.
Good
There's
idea.
lights in there.
That's a really good idea.
We had mentioned that the other day, but we haven't done anything in there yet, right? We haven't nominated that.
Messed with that yet.
Yeah, well, maybe that's next, we could probably get that done with the project.
I just noticed it gets really dark in there, especially since you put the ads on the doors that blocks
Yeah.
the bottom half.
Oh,
Benefits is doing a good
benefits.
job.
Huh? Yeah.
All those benefits ads coming on the door.
Yeah, yeah, we can certainly look at that. We've got a little bit of money left in the lighting budget
Just
for
something,
the project.
No problem.
Yep. And the new carpet starts going in Thursday, so probably in the next month we'll be done with that too, so.
I like it. Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the staff recommendation for funding not to exceed $80,000 to replace the automatic doors in the entry vestibules.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's vote on the motion by Commissioner Evans to approve recommending funds not to exceed $80,000 to replace the automatic doors in the entry vestibules. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, I think what I'd like to do, if everyone approves, we have a fairly short work session, is we'll adjourn the board meeting and then immediately go into the two items of the work session, if that is acceptable to everyone. And then we can close off for the closed meeting for the separate item for the director's stuff. So with that.
Well, you're still gonna have to come back though, so you're not gonna close this meeting, because you have to come back and then make your recommendation
Come back.
to the board meeting. You have to open the board meeting, you're gonna close it for the closed session, and then you've gotta open it back up to give your recommendation.
The recommendation for what?
If there is a recommendation for any changes made to the
Oh, okay.
contract or what.
Okay. Well, yes.
So you can pause it, and you can skip over here, but you're gonna have to open this back up anyhow, so.
Okay. So should we do that? So let's pause the board meeting, go directly into the work session, if that is acceptable to everyone. Discuss those two items, and then we'll come back for any further recommendations. And is there any objection to that? Okay, so the official meeting is paused, and the first work session item is assignment of a private hangar ground lease to Electric City Aero LLC.
Yes, we were approached by one of the hangar owners down in the private hangar area that would like to assign the lease to someone else. We do these from time to time. The leases are transferable unless we're assigning it to a business that isn't compatible with those uses. We typically don't restrict that. I mean, obviously, if they're doing something, roller skating arena or something that is airport related, we would like to comment on that. But we don't see any reason to oppose this. So we would recommend the assignment of the lease to the new owner.
Okay. And do we know which hangar, where that is?
I'll show Laura with that.
Are we talking
Oh, boy.
This one's probably the best drawing.
Are we talking the large hangar?
It's the large one, yeah.
That's
Where
split
am I?
in
Oh, wait.
two?
Doesn't go far enough, does
Doesn't.
it?
Large, the one behind Maria.
Yeah. There it is, all right.
Okay, so it's this one here,
Okay.
okay,
And half of that is with Jan Blumendahl and half is with Lowenbro?
right.
And which half?
So the half that is Jan's is going to be assigned.
So Lowenbro will still own the south half,
Mhm.
or the north half, and then Jan
Yeah.
is selling out the other half?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's 50 by 60?
It's a good sized facility, I don't know.
50 by
what-
60
Yeah.
insulated, so that's a big size hangar.
Yeah. And the owner does own planes, so that's good.
A very good sign.
Right?
Questions, comments? And this will go on to the,
Not until August, yeah.
and they're not in a hurry, that's no problem. We don't need
It
it.
doesn't seem
No,
to be.
he's fine with it.
They
Yeah.
can rent until then, or whatever they
We
want.
can figure it out. It'll take them a few months to get all the title paperwork and everything figured out anyway.
Okay, very good. We'll move that to the August board meeting. And last but not least, assignment of the Arndt land lease discussion.
Some of you may recall a few years ago, we had leased a portion of the airport land, about almost 3 acres, to Mr. Bob Arts down in the gully below the airport there. It's alongside a drainage feature that a small amount of the airport drainage comes off in that particular ravine. That's probably why the airport purchased it many years ago. And so the way we set that agreement up was a 40-year lease that was transferable, and the owner is now considering selling their property, and so they want to have the ability to assign it. We expect that probably by the time we come back in August, that he'll probably have his property on the market. As we indicated to him at the time, there's a tangential benefit in being able to sell someone 3 acres of. It's actually a nice rural parcel. It's really rolling and a great little recreational property for somebody to fart around in the weeds there. The neighbors have horses right there. Our thought at the time was, well, if he's interested in that property, then we'll lease it to him, and he had approached the board about leasing it to him, and then give him the ability to transfer it when he sells his property. And so now he's interested in doing that, wants the ability to transfer it, and we'd recommend that the board give us the authority to transfer that agreement to a potential new owner down there at that property.
Can you show us where it is on that?
Yep.
Owner?
Let's see. That one may be hard to find. Let's see if we've got a better. Go over the ravine. Rod, you want to take a stab at that? It's
Right here.
Yeah, it's not.
right there.
It's right here, because this
Yeah.
is his house right here.
Right there, and this property is just kind of goes alongside that stream. It's kind of a linear, long parcel. And it does have access off Sun Prairie Road, but it's, like I said, pretty rolling.
And he does not even have his house on the market right now. He's making sure that when he puts it on the market, he can stay and this can be transmitted. So this would either come to the August meeting if there's a quick sale, or whenever it's ready.
But given that we have essentially a 2-month pause, we wanted to get it on the board agenda now. So if he is on the market this fall, we're ready to get that approved.
And we have no additional cleanup requirements or anything to do to allow it to be transferable?
No.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts? Everybody okay with bringing that to the August meeting? So be it. Perfect. Okay. So with that, Laura, now can we reopen?
Nope, let's finish these items.
Is there
And
more?
then close the work session. Yep.
Is there more?
This is the request for items to be added, board comments,
Oh, okay.
public.
There you go.
All that.
All right. So are there any other items that would be requested to be added to the work session? Okay. And if there are no further items for the work session, I declare the work session
No.
adjourned.
We still need to ask for the comments.
Oh.
Sorry.
Good call. You can tell why I only do this once every 6 months. All right. So we finish this up by any public comments in the work session before we close the work session.
As John had mentioned earlier, that Wings of Freedom tour is going to be here in Great Falls for the July weekend. And this is going to be kind of an unusual event in that there's going to be 5 World War II aircraft here all at the same time. I was checking in with them last Friday, and one of their objectives is to sell rides on the airplane. This is a fundraiser for them. And I was shocked to hear how much activity they've already sold, pre-sold, before they even get here to Great Falls. The preceding stop is in Kalispell, and their following stop is in Billings as they move eastward across the northern United States. So if there's ever a time you wanted to get a gift for somebody, this would be the time to think about that. So, and you can even purchase a ride in a P-51.
No kidding.
Yep.
That's
Get
pretty
your
awesome.
checkbook out.
Yeah.
They don't give that away.
Well, that would be.
So anyway, I just wanted to ring that little publicity bell there, so it's going to be kind of a fun weekend.
Wow. That would be amazing. Okay, so public comment and Airport Authority Board comments. Commissioner Lalonde.
No, sir.
Commissioner Arias. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Evans. I have no further comments. Now can I adjourn? the-
Yes.
Okay. All right, with no further business, I declare the work session adjourned. Thank you. And back to the primary meeting. Let's start back with that one. Airport Authority Board comments.
Nope,
Is there one post about that?
you're gonna have to reopen it. So you just need to close it now, and then you'll do those comments after you finish the business of the board meeting. So right now, you're gonna close it for a personnel issue.
Okay.
Where
gotcha.
privacy of the individual outweighs the public's right to know. And we're officially closing at 2:18.
Okay.
So when you open, I will mark the time, then go to the recommendation and the rest of the meeting.
Okay, gotcha. So we're closing it temporarily. Can we take a 5-minute break? And we'll meet for just the board members and make our final discussion to make sure there's been no changes since we last had our discussion. Then we'll bring John in for that, and then we'll reopen the meeting. Give us about 10 minutes. And then for anyone who is interested, we'll reopen the meeting for final discussion at 2:30 would be perfect for you. Yeah.
So 2:30 for him, but you're thinking around when for everyone else?
2:45.
Okay.
15 minutes should be plenty discussion with what we've had before. 2:45-ish. Thank you. Let's do a quick 5-minute break, pit stop, but we'll get back in here and make sure we've got all of our thoughts together, and then we'll bring John in.